Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that this week is ours to conclude our work on the budget. I pray, Father, for our deliberations today, that we will be able to make good progress, that we will make the right decisions. We remember those who grieve today over lost ones, in particular our Sarge, and are mindful of him, and pray that you will bless our deliberations as we conclude today. In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. Colleagues, when we finished up on Friday, we had two more appropriations to conclude on the Ministry of Health, and we'd like to get those taken care of this morning. So we are going to start by looking at those two items are EI 53 and EI 57, found on page 32. So we're going to begin first by examining EI 50. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? On Friday, we were given a commitment by the minister that they would determine how many staff members was needed to properly crew the 21 trucks and increase in pay. They've had the weekend. I wonder if that has been done so it can be put into this budget before it's approved.
You need, yeah, but you need to hand them up now. Wait, I don't know when to wait now.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although the appetite is there to try to solve what the member brought up, it has not been settled as yet, not even over the weekend. We have to look at the structure of DEH, and then we have to discuss this with Parks, and then take this to caucus and cabinet and possibly bring back a supplementary.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is all of that going to be done prior to the arrival of the vehicles?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'm rather uncomfortable with that decision, and here's why. While we cannot tell the Civil Service and Parks who to hire, I believe it is incumbent upon us. We've been going through this exercise now for well over 2 years. It was brought up in the last budget, Finance Committee, where we talked about that the problem was not necessarily equipment, the problem was crew for the trucks. And every time we got in a real big jam, the Deputy Governor gave the Director of Environmental Health some 10 or 15 people for like 2 weeks to clear up the backlog. So this is not something new. And if my concern is that if Finance Committee does not put the money in the budget, then it's going to allow the Civil Service to continue to wrangle over it. And their argument is going to be that there's no funds in the budget for it. Because there's no funds in the budget here for the 5%. And there's no funds in the budget for the upgrading and regrading of those positions. And I would strongly recommend to the minister that he call the Department of the Chief Environmental Health Officer and then have him submit what the numbers need to be and what the salary need to be and put it in this budget. But it's up to them, sir. I can tell you that the garbage wasn't picked up in Northside on Friday again.
That is my intention, to have the director. Possibly that was already submitted. I would have to double check with the director to get those numbers.
Let's move on to EI 53, Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing. $33,768,867 in 2020 and $8,261,993 in 2021. Questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to everyone. Can the minister give us an outline of the changes that was been presented to us just now and the purposes for it? Thank you.
Member for Georgetown, I think we're going to have to defer the questions until we actually get to the motion. We're actually discussing the vote right now. So we'll take the questions, but because that's a motion. Okay, no, okay, fair enough.
Mr. Chairman,
Member for East End.
thank you. Are you going to this new circular that concerns this motion that the minister is bringing?
Yeah, that's what I'm being advised by the clerk now, that we have to put this on the record now for us to discuss this, because these are changes to the actual vote, is my understanding.
Well, may I respectfully bring to your attention that that there may be a procedural matter here that needs to be cleared up, because just getting the opportunity to look at this, we are voting to vote money to EA4, and there are no provisions on the table to approve monies to EA4.
There's a similar change for EA4, and it's not in the Julie gets it. Get her sign it. That's one. We'll do a similar one. To put this in EA4.
Are there more than one? Yeah, EA4 member is is a vote appropriation under the Ministry of Education, and I've been advised by the FS there will be another amendment as well to come from the ministry when we get to examining those.
Well, we can't be approving it here then, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, sir. Precisely the procedural matter that I want to address.
Okay.
The EA4 is yet to visit or be presented to this finance committee, and we are anticipating what that vote will be by approving it here.
That's what this does.
No, it doesn't. may I then respectfully ask how much is going into EA4? Where?
We're decreasing EI 53, decreasing it, not increasing.
Respectfully, I think that's what we need to vote on. Where we put the money has to come up when we get to the vote, where we're putting the money. There has to be a separate motion to vote here. There's no need for this paper to identify where it is going.
I think the minister and the minister, they were only trying to be helpful here by indicating here where it was actually going to be, going. When we'll vote for that when we come to it.
Mr. Chairman, we are voting for it to be decreased out of this and put it into EA4, and we cannot do that. It has to be done a decrease of the original. Well, Mr. Chairman, the first one that was sent out, I don't know who else has it, has a 33771. There is no need to say that you're decreasing that during this discussion on 53. Absolutely no reason to be saying we're going to put it there.
And we're not asking members to vote on that narrative there either. So,
But Mr. Chairman, the
would you prefer that
procedures,
we just take it out?
the procedures in this parliament requires precise information and vote. You're asking us to decrease it with the proviso that it goes someplace else. We cannot anticipate what members are going to do when EA4 arrives.
Trying to anticipate it, sir, because we're not voting on the increase at that point. That will come later. Remember here, the chief officer has the other.
May I respectfully?
It's not yet signed by the minister.
May I respectfully read what this minister is asking this committee to do? In accordance with provision of Standing Order 651, I, the Honorable Minister responsible for Health, Environment, Culture and Housing, give notice to move the following amendment to the appropriation financial years 2020 and 2021 Bill 2019, and that the schedule to the aforementioned bill be amended by changing the appropriation shown by the noted amount. You cannot do that. We are doing 53, which is under this minister's purview. Constitutionally, he is responsible for it. The Minister for Education, who has lands, the Minister for Lands, you cannot anticipate her budget.
That's all.
Mr. Chairman, can I
decrease
suggest a simple amendment to the bill, that you delete all this stuff about going to E4 to purchase lands and all that? Just delete that out of the motion that he's doing. If it is part of the motion that he's making, then we are committing it. Just delete that section and only decrease it by the amounts that you say. Is when we get to EA4, then whoever the minister responsible for that will move a motion to increase EA4 by this amount. I think that's the proper way to do it. Just redo the motion and take that out.
Member, I think this accomplishes it, except that it has this bit of explanatory language that we were hoping would be helpful to the House to understand what was taking place. But
Mr. Chairman,
want us to take it out, we will do so.
This goes above explan notes. This is a motion to do something. It's not
And the
just an
motion only
explan note.
asks us to reduce, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, you will recall, the first motion has not been considered. Precisely. So there's no need to put in here anything about what's going to go to the next one. Just make a motion for what you want in 53. Forget about what being decreased by. That is by verbal explanation or whatever you want to do. You can't do that, sir.
So we won't go ahead and all right, we're going to go ahead and take those explanatory language out of the motion, and that will remove the confusion.
By virtue of having that in there, it says it.
All right, well, we'll leave EI 53 for the moment, and we will go and we will consider EI 57, National Housing Development Trust, for $8,022,133 in 2020 and $5 million in 2021. Are there any questions? Either of the opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like an explanation as to what this 13 million is going to be used for.
Mr. Chair, I'd allow the general manager to answer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Julio Ramos, National Housing General Manager. Yes, the 8 million is for bond commitment for 2020 and also for 2021, which also has a project portion for refund. So for 2020, we have a balloon payment of close to 7 million and another million for the old bond. So we're still paying the two bonds, of which the 7 million is due on the Butterfield bond, on the balloon payment due in June 2020. And for 2021, we have $1 million for the old Butterfield bond of 1 million, and then close to 4 million for project refund.
It's all well and good to tell us that it's a bond repayment, but we need to know the initial bond, payments over time, and when this bond is going to be completed.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the National Housing Development Trust had two bonds, of which one was for the first set of houses way back in 2004 for the houses that were built in the various districts, and each bond in itself was for 12 million, an equivalent 12 million CI. The first bond, which is with Sun Life Assurance, that one is not due until 2024, and that's the one that we're paying on approximately 1 million on a given year. Sorry. The second bond, which is for the bonds for the house that we built from 2010, which was for 12 million as well, 12.083 million, and that's the Butterfield bond for the new houses that we built from houses from 2010 till now. So with that bond, there's a balloon payment on the balance of, call it 7 million, which is due in 2020. Once that is paid, that's the balloon payment for that bond.
And the first bond wasn't a balloon payment?
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, sir.
So how much have we been paying on that?
Mr. Chairman, if you give me a quick minute, let me just. Mr. Chairman, through you, for the first bond, by the end of December 2019, it's anticipated that we have 4 million left from the close to 12 million that was paid on the first bond, on the Sun Life Assurance for the first set of houses that were built and obviously demolished because they were not conducive to the environment. With the second bond, like I said, it was 7 million that's basically due in June 2020.
The obvious question then is, we're paying off these bonds, but we have no assets.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. For the first set of houses that we built that were later demolished, which is what they refer to as most commonly as the metal houses, there's no assets to show for them, obviously because of when they were built in 2004, a lot of them were basically demolished after Hurricane Ivan, and some individuals, and over time when individuals move out, we demolish them as well. So in essence, there's no assets to show apart from the 20 houses that are in West Bay that are not necessarily deemed as value.
2010?
For the 2010 houses, those, we built 116 to date. What we've done with those is we've sold them. Say, for example, in the district of East End, we built 12, we sold, we built another 16, we sold 5 of them, there's one pending sale.
16?
Sorry, 6.
Yeah, because I go there almost every day.
That is correct. So with the other houses, with that set of houses, we have 83 that have been sold. So we built close to 116, 83 that have been sold, and the remaining that are under tenancy arrangements.
And so the 2010, we have 83 homes out of that.
That we've sold, Mr. Chairman.
How many homes did we get out of it? You emphasize that you have sold, so that means there's some left.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, we built 116, of which 83 of them have been sold outright. And the remaining are under tenancy arrangements, which is what you would refer to in the books of National Housing Development Trust, of individuals who were grandfathered in from the old housing arrangement and some that were on the lease arrangement. Both arrangements are now discontinued. Individuals continue to pay off on these properties. And once it's paid off, it becomes theirs.
So, Mr. Chairman, is it true then that we're conflating those two bonds to affect our commitments? That is, the second one is being conflated with the first one to achieve our commitments on the first one. Mr. Chairman, let me
Yeah, he
explain
don't
this.
understand the conflict.
Okay. We're using the money from the second bond, 12 million, to meet our commitments that we had from the first bond. That is because those homes were never, in effect, completed. So now we're using the monies from the second bond to meet those commitments that we had from the first bond.
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, sir, that's not the case. Every year or any given budget period, the refund for bond commitments to settle the bond arrangements is given to us by way of grants through this House under government in terms of budget appropriations. The funds that we get in terms of the house sales or whenever we construct, those are reinvested into further developing within the various districts. So to your question is, we're not using funds from the bond to settle debt. Those debt arrangements or those refunds are given to us from central government.
How did we bill 116 then? What bond?
Okay.
Was the first bond expended, utilized totally for those homes? How then have we built 116 and we 33 are, you said 83 was sold. Out of 116, if sold is 83, I mean it's 33 that you have on lease to meet some of those that were in the house tenancy, those that were in the homes prior to the second bond 2010. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes. Individuals that are in their houses is basically they're paying back on the arrangement, and what we collect, we tend to use to further redevelop.
Okay. So, but what I'm saying is, I'm asking, is that we use the second bond to meet that commitment.
Mr. Chairman, through you, for the individuals that were grandfathered into, yes. Because they were given the first arrangement, their house wasn't any good and we need a transition. So to your concern in terms that we're using the second bond for that, yes, but only for a few of individuals who got grandfathered into. And those individuals were basically transferred because they were in good standing. I trust this answers the
So
question.
what happens to the other individual? How many homes it was out the first bond?
Mr. Chairman, through you, approximately 107 were basically transitioned in the old set of houses, of which, if you would just allow me, now on the old houses there's only about 20, which is in West Bay. Other individuals have moved on and some have transitioned to the housing site.
So those people don't have any homes? How many were transferred out of the 107 of the first bond were transferred into those that we built, be it through the second bond or appropriation from this legislature?
The Chairman, through you, 1 minute, let me review my notes here. Just to be in. Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, at the time when we were redeveloping and rebuilding, a total of approximately 19 lease to own and 13 clients got transitioned. So that gives it a 32 individuals who were in good standing got transitioned into the new houses. The remaining ones were individuals that are not in good standing, but some individuals moved on as well, moved out of the houses and moved on.
Where are the other people?
Mr. Chairman, through you, as indicated, a lot of individuals moved on. Some moved out of the houses, and as they moved out, we demolished these houses.
Where are they? That's 75 homes.
Mr. Chairman, through you, as indicated, individuals have moved on with their own housing arrangements as they no longer had an interest in the house. Some moved on in approximately 20 are in West Bay at this moment. So from the 107, we had 20 that are remaining that we can account for, and then we had another 32 that got transitioned. The remaining individuals moved out of their houses. Some were just under lease arrangements, and they no longer had an interest in the affordable house. As they move out, we demolished the house as there were no longer any arrangements between parties.
And we didn't recover anything from that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that's correct. We did not recover.
So are we satisfied that one, the 2004 bond was fully utilized?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. It was fully utilized.
Okay, so we have lost $12 million.
In
Good.
essence, yes.
The 2010 $12 million has been fully utilized as well.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. It has been fully utilized, and with proceeds that we get from the sale, we reinvest that to develop for more houses.
And we have come up with 116 homes for our people out of $24 million.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. For what we can account for and show, that is correct.
So what do you mean they pick it up and move with it? Or? They took it away?
No, Mr. Chairman.
So how you use that caveat that for how the amount you can account for? You mean the monies or the houses?
Mr. Chairman, the old bond is a loss. We have nothing to show for it. The new bond, obviously, from what we accounted for, we made 116. So with the
Mr.
24
Chairman,
million,
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if the gentleman is not watching the words he's saying, but now you open up another can of worms where you said, for what you can account for, we have received 116 houses. Account for in what way? The houses or the monies?
Mr. Chairman, through you, for what we account for in terms of houses that we built, with the remaining, with the new bond, it's both. For the funds that we've used in the second bond, along with the house that we built today, that's what we're accounting for. Mr. Chairman, the question was basically saying, so from the 24 million that we had, we only have 116. That is correct. We can account basically of what we spent in the last bond and also still have remaining houses and sell, and we have a listing of inventory versus what we have in stock.
And how much are we selling these homes for?
Mr. Chairman, through you, these houses, they were sold a 2-bedroom for 105, now basically 110, the going price, and the 3-bedroom for 120.
And that's how much they were sold for throughout this whole initiative to do homes.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that's correct.
105 and 120.
With the recent new houses, there were 110 and 125. They just went up in this year. But it's, yes.
And the 24 million. Over 200,000 per home. That's the value of construction. Over 200,000 per home. In 24 million.
Mr. Chairman, through you, not all houses were sold for that price because we, as indicated to you, we had a total of 32 individuals that got grandfathered into the program, so that we would have sold them on the balance that they had from the old arrangement. So not all of them were sold at that price.
No. I'm trying to determine the net value of our housing initiative, i.e. $24 million in bonds used to build homes for Caymanians, for needed Caymanians, those in need of homes, which is an initiative that must be applauded. at the end of the day, the net value of $24 million is that we spent 207,000 per home, since we only have 116. And you did tell me that the 2004 bond is going to be completed with this 8 million this year. Or was it the 2010 bond that will be completed this year?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. The 2004 bond is not due until 2024. Okay, and the 2010 bond, that's the balloon payment that is due next year.
And the first one wasn't a balloon payment either?
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, sir.
I know. Interest plus land. Because the land was not factored into it, to the cost of the homes.
That's correct.
Yeah. I don't know if the minister can say, and I don't want to be overly critical, Minister, because I have seen a new board, albeit that the individual is a friend of mine, Mr. Tuna Powell, but I don't hold any brief for him. But certainly they have done a pretty good job. I understand they're trying to acquire lands on Linford Pearson Highway and whatnot. And I certainly don't want to be critical of them, because I have seen them become very efficient, but more importantly, I see that the building of the homes are becoming more and more efficient, with me recommending some time ago to the energy management people in the ministry that we should use government as the leading authority on energy management, and they are now going to use the foam blocks and whatnot and increase the SARE rating on air conditions and that kind of stuff. A little more costly, few $1,000s more costly, but for the people, it will benefit them in the long run. What are we doing to try to bring this back in line where that board is debt-free and utilize the monies that they can go and borrow on their own, because they're seriously hamstrung by having this bond hanging over their heads, and it doesn't allow them, as a board which is entitled to sell, buy, rent, borrow, it's seriously they're seriously hamstrung to go and do their own thing, to go out there from a fiduciary responsibility. They can't do that, and banks are not ready to give them that authority if they have all this hanging over their heads, and they have to come down here to ask Parliament to give them more money to do it. Isn't it the issue? How much is left on that first bond to be paid off?
Mr. Chairman, through you, approximately $4 million by the end of this year is left in the first bond.
That's after paying the 8.
No, Mr. Chairman. After paying the 8, it's only going to be about $3 million. The 8 is covering, Mr. Chairman, the second bond balloon payment of close to $7 million and the $1 million for the old bond.
No, the first one, the 204, is only $1 million?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Now I want to know how much is left on that bond. The first one.
After 2020, about $3 million.
and the 7 is paying off the newer bond. Mr. Minister, I believe it is incumbent upon this legislature and this government to pay that off and clean the slate. For $3 million more this year, it's incumbent upon this legislature and the government, cabinet that is, to pay this off and give them a little freedoms to go and borrow money or whatever the case may be. Because it's important that we provide homes. I'm not saying give it away. They must have equity in it. But it's incumbent that we ensure that those who are not able at this stage to do it, that we provide the initiative. And I believe that the board would be better served if we were to clear them of those encumbrances and let them get on with what they have to do. They have thus far been doing pretty good with it, under the leadership of Mr. Tony Powell.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say good morning to Mr. Jose. Through you to the Minister,
Julio.
can you say, well, I heard the Director for Housing say that, the 12 million was all lost. Can you clarify whether land was purchased with that bond? Because the land isn't gone, so it can't be a total loss, unless I'm misunderstanding it.
Mr. Chair, through you, as indicated with the bond issued in 2010, we've built 116, we've had inflows, and we've used those funds to further generate and further develop within the districts. So to your concern, yes, that is correct. We did acquire land. As of most recent, we acquired a 25-acre property in Georgetown, and we also acquired another 11 acres in Northside, basically to provide housing opportunities. Yes, and we still also own a bit of land in the various districts as well. So we do have assets to represent for it, of which it shouldn't be misconstrued the fact that the land that we had before was vested to us, but yes, we have acquired some land along with the proceeds that we had from our pockets.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it wasn't a total loss then is what we're saying, because if we use that money to purchase some land, would it be fair to say it wasn't a total loss, it's just the structures, the cost within the structures that was lost, because we still had the land, correct?
Mr. Chair, through you, that is correct.
Thank you. Can the director give us an idea of the overall plans for the future for the various different districts? And obviously you know that I'm particularly focused on Georgetown, but obviously the whole house wants to hear about all areas. Can you give us an idea of what the plans are?
Mr. Chair, through you, with the proceeds and funds that we have in-house, we already continue to develop East End more with a few more houses. For the District of West Bay, we're also planning approximately 20 houses as well within the Boatswain Bay Lighthouse Garden site. And the next step is obviously we're looking at Bordentown as well to further develop, because there's land space there. And of course with Georgetown, which is going to be a massive project in itself, we're also looking at that as well. But the board is mindful of the fact of speaking to all members to pick their brain as well, sorry, that's correct, and Northside, to see what is more and what their constituents are asking for, so we can have an approach, an agreed approach to better service in the Cayman community.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, can you tell me if there is any specific plans for the Georgetown side? I think I heard you say that there was a large portion of land acquired on the Linford Pearson Highway. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, through you, that is correct. We acquired a 24.5-acre property off the Linford Pearson bypass, which has capacity for a significant and even multi-purpose public use as well.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. When you say multi-purpose, can you expand on that? Is that a part of the plan? Because currently, right now, the approach that we're taking is just single dwelling homes, not semi-detached or apartments or anything like that. Is there any plans involved to maybe take a different approach, whether it be apartment buildings, semi-detached, detached, or mixed use of the different kinds?
Mr. Chair, it's a very good question from the member. I've been speaking to the chairman of the board and getting some reports on persons who have qualified, persons who didn't qualify, or persons who wanted something a little more. I've asked them to look at scenarios that gave us a little more than what we're selling now, than the 120 for those persons who couldn't normally qualify at the bank but wanted something a little more or a little more space. And also asked them to look at situations that were a little below of persons who couldn't qualify, because we have to look at all sectors of this economy and all walks of life. And we found that some people are not qualifying for the scheme that we have ongoing, and I've asked them to look to see what they can do to offer something that is even a little more affordable. So that is something that we're looking at. I've asked the board to look into this because we feel that persons above and below want opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's good news, to be honest, because I think with the reality of the cost of housing and the approval rate of the banks and the lack of increase in wages is becoming a factor. So are we saying then that, before I ask the next question, can you say what the lowest price that is offered through the affordable housing scheme?
On the existing agreement, the 2-bedroom is 110,000, and the 3-bedroom is 125,000. What we must note, though, that it went up a tad, but there's more amenities included inside the turnkey. Now we're offering granite with wood cabinets. Before it used to be Formica, and the board has managed to go out and negotiate a contract that was the same as what we were purchasing before, for an upgraded element of granite and wood cabinet, and there's no sheetrock in the new homes. Everything has been upgraded.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Through you again, Mr. Chair. With the lowest price of a 2-bedroom single dwelling home of 110, if the housing board considers potentially the apartment complex kind of setup or apartments alongside each other, would it be fair to say that could potentially substantially bring down the pricing because of land usage?
Mr. Chair, through you, that is correct. That could be an agreed approach, that if we are going to basically come down with the construction costs and look at the concept of blocks, then obviously it would be reduced costs, which would be passed on to the prospective homeowners.
Thank you. Can the minister or the director say what price line are we shooting for Has that been established? If it's not, then I can understand.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we have not gotten to that as yet. As is, we need to agree on an approach as to what would work out best for Georgetown, considering there's a limited amount of land and space. But also, we need to factor in as well in terms of the demand. We know the demand is there, but it's basically looking at a balanced approach as to how much more and how much we can do with respect to what we have and what we can work with.
I mean, Mr. Chair, to go out on the limb, I would think it's fair to say from what they've seen, this has to be confirmed by the board and they have to do all the numbers, but there's a slot between 75 and 90.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Through you, Mr. Chair, when are we expecting to get an update from the board as to, particularly for Georgetown Central, Georgetown as a whole, when do we think we'll hear some announcements from the housing board as to the overall plan for that site, housing prices, and the overall concept, particularly for Georgetown?
Mr. Chair, through you, it would be ideal if we can get a position, but it's all pending in terms of how far we can go with the funding that we have or the cash flows that we have in hand. It is anticipated that we'll continue with the plan works of what we have in terms of land that's already has the infrastructure in place. Obviously, in the case of East End, West Bay, and the other districts that we have. For Georgetown, it's going to take a lot of work in terms of clearance, dredging, and also fill. So we're going to do this in progress, and hopefully I would say by the mid of the year, we should have a position the next year of where we're going to be with that in terms of how far our commitment can go in terms of inflows of cash and what we can commit to.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the Honorable Premier said in his budget statement about potentially using the housing development plans to address temporary housing for needs assessment unit applicants. Is there any considerations or have the board been spoken to about this intention, and is Mr. Jose aware of it?
Its name is Julio, but we forgive you, and I can Mr. Chair, I can give the member some comfort, let him know some 10 years now, since first being elected, it was always my intention to identify property that at least government had some kind of dwellings to offer as rental properties for some of the NAU persons that can't find accommodations. That was unsuccessful then, but I can give you comfort that it's not lost within my vision to work with the different departments, whether that's NAU or otherwise, in trying to achieve this, if this is something that they would support. Because we just don't want to build it and then they don't utilize it. So, but what we're trying not to do is to create, I hate to use the P word, but we want to ensure that the quality of these projects is one that is appreciated by Caymanians, and we don't want to create a worse situation than we have now by putting the wrong programs in place. We're trying to grow lively and healthy communities where people can raise children.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have a couple more questions and I'll be wrapping it up. I respect the minister's approach to make sure to keep this, his vision alive in respect to addressing those who need temporary housing. But I am obligated to ask the questions about the financing to do such thing. the Honorable Premier has suggested that this is one of the ways they intend to address the problem of housing for persons getting temporary assistance from needs assessment units. So, though it may be in the vision, it has to be in the vision based on this budget. This budget is for the next 2 years. So if it's not in this budget, then it's not in our vision for the next 2 years. So unless the plans have been budgeted for, then we can't solve that problem for another 2 years. So again, I ask, is there any plans to create temporary housing or housing that can be used for temporary purposes for persons who are in needs assessment unit within this?
Mr. Chair, these things have to be approved by the board. I can tell you my vision, but then we have to respect the board's ability to make these decisions. When we first started, when I met with when I got elected 2017, and we were looking at boards, and met with the chairman of the housing board, who's the chairman now also. What he said to me was that from his experience over the years, and he has been there for a couple of years, because they had different programs in place. We had rent, we had lease to own, we had different programs, and a lot of them were failing. The one program that wasn't failing was the purchase of these homes. And he said if I wanted him to continue on, that this was one of his suggestions, to not encourage some of the other programs that we had, because we were losing badly on them. Because we chose this path is the reason why we're able to build so many homes now, because we recoup the monies right back and quicker. So the more efficient we are in building these homes and recouping back the monies, then that gives us the ability to be able to see our vision through.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Chair, this is my last question, and I appreciate your patience with me. I thank the Minister for his explanation. Am I to understand then that the board will be responsible for whether to decide to create temporary housing? And if it's the board and we're not sure what the board is going to approve, is it fair to say that this area is not necessarily addressing the problem of the temporary housing? Because I can only go by what the Honorable Premier has said, that he will be initiating to address the temporary housing problem that we have with the needs assessment unit. So I just want to clarify that we're saying the board has to decide this. I know it's a very capable board, and I'm proud of them for what they've been doing so far. But I need to understand how we're solving this problem clearly.
Mr. Chair, I can say if and when the community affairs chief officer comes and gives us a presentation to validate what the member is suggesting, then at that time caucus and cabinet can make a decision and so direct the board to move down that path.
So it's fair to say if cabinet directs the housing development board to address this matter, they will. So it's up to the government to address it then, to direct them to do so.
Yes, and you can only suspect the reason why the board may have a different opinion, because it's not one that will bring quick
returns. Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Minister, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member for, Minister for Education, you had questions, ma'am? Okay. Member for Northside.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the National Housing Trust has recently purchased 11 acres of land in Northside. Is any of this money going to be used to put in the infrastructure on that site?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. On the breakdown of this equity, the equity is broken down as follows: 7 million for 2020 for the Butterfield bond, another million for the Sun Life Assurance bond, and then on the 2021 you have another equivalent of 1 million. We're anticipating that with inflows of what we have and our cash reserves, we're going to get some works at a minimum, even to get a few houses in the district of Northside. The degree of how much infrastructure and works is yet to be determined, but even so, if we can try to get a commitment of 5 or 6, which is the current demand, that's the aim we're going at.
So you're looking to put in sufficient infrastructure to build 5 or 6 houses in 2020?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is what we're looking at, but we're taking them in phases by districts and planning ahead. So I do not want to go on the record and say we're going to do it in 2020, but even so, it's already in the planning process.
All in favor of EI 57?
Hold a second, Mr.
National-
Chairman. Sorry.
I had no other indications of,
I
of
apologize.
questions.
Yeah, on that side, yeah.
I'm going to go to
Yeah.
Minister for Education. She did indicate earlier.
Thanks, Chair. Just
Go
two
ahead,
quick
ma'am.
things. I wonder, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but from Housing, if you could indicate whether the homes are insured and explain why there is a total loss if they were insured. If the homes are not insured, if you could ensure, pardon the pun, that going forward, they are insured to decrease government's liability. And secondly, when you do the calculations, I think he said it was like $24 million, works out about $207,000. If the maximum house is costing $125,000, does that mean that government through the board has another equity injection of some $75,000? Because otherwise the numbers don't really add up.
Mr. Chairman, through you, to the concern of insured and the risk, yes. Under our existing model and even our houses, we have our houses insured. If they're under our inventory or our responsibility, they're insured. Once they're sold, it is the homeowner's responsibility to have their house insured. In relation to the calculator efforts of the difference of a house sale versus what we're losing and what we're making, the 24 million is in relation to 2 bonds. It's in relation to the old houses that we cannot account for, and also, which is the 12.5 million, and the other 12.5 million is for the new houses. Just as an example, we're selling the house, just as an example of East End. We sold the house for 125. Just that alone, we had that house there being built for 112,000. We had to basically furnish them with hurricane shutters, which is what we cover. We have overhead cost, and also the portion of land bit, but is not significantly high because we were vested that land, and even so there's spacing. So it's not necessarily a 75,000 per house that we're losing, but I would calculate an estimated of amount of 15 to 20 the most per house on how we're building now and what we have in terms of our costing. So whenever we build these houses, the portion of infrastructure and roads, historically, we get those as refunds. In this case of what we're doing for the budget appropriation, hence the point of the 3 to 4 million in 2021 that we will be refunded. So say, for example, if we were to go to Northside and we were going to build and we accumulate $100,000 for roads infrastructure, we will bill that to government because we're not recovering that cost as an injection for us to continue with our project development.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this bond issue. When we started out, what was the total bond amount that we started with?
Mr. Chairman, through you, in 2004, National Housing Development Trust went into a bond commitment, or the government went on our behalf for close to 12 million at that time.
Thank you very much. And the reason I'm asking what I'm asking is that just looking at the on page 268, the equity investment to cover debt servicing, I notice for your on page 549 of your ownership agreement, just so if members want to follow along, I'll give you a chance to catch up so you can understand my line of questioning. And this is in essence the forecast balance sheet for the National Housing Development Trust. You with me? Page 549 of the ownership agreement for 2020-2021.
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm looking at 549, but that's nothing to do with housing. Mr. Chair,
Budget statements, so he in ownership agreements.
you have that there?
You need ownership agreement. Yeah. You got budget statement.
It must have been the same page.
You have your ownership agreement?
This one doesn't have it.
I have a copy, but
You have 549?
Okay, thanks. I'm looking at your 2019 forecast statement, and I see the part that says current portion of bond payable, 7,592,000. And then I also see the other bond payable down the bottom of 3,551,000. Those two added together is 11,143,000. Okay? When I look on page 268 of the planning estimates, I see that the government is forecasting 9,267,686 as part of equity investment to cover debt servicing. So I'm trying to figure out what happened to this 9.2 or 9.3 million compared to this 11.1 million there. How do these two reconcile?
Mr. Chair, through you, the numbers that you're referencing on the other page of the 9, I think it was 2 or 3 million. That's an error on, basically those are numbers that were just shifted, and those from last 2 years.
Well, because these documents form part of the overall approval process. So the thing what I was trying to reconcile is that if you are sitting on 11.1 million now in bond, and the government was giving you 9.3 million before, So I was trying to figure out what happened to that 9.3 million. So you're basically saying that 9.3 million is incorrect.
Mr. Chair, the 9.3 million in the other bond, that was figures from the previous year. At that point in time, when we were doing the calculation for the balloon payment, it wasn't, we later found out that it's not due until not December 2019, but until June, so it was a quarter off. When these estimates were first given way back, that's when we moved to the year 18-month period, and as such, that is why that balloon payment was captured then. So in essence, for 2019, that is what we call an excess portion, of which is basically a finance to consider, because the bond is not due until the next year.
So the question is then, the 9.3 million was never paid.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, then through you, sir, I think we'll have to correct this number in the planning estimates, because it's basically showing that for the forecast for 2019, it's showing that $9,267,686 would have been as an equity investment into the National Housing Development Trust. So that number needs to be corrected then to reflect what the correct number is. Okay, thanks very much for clarifying that. Then my next question then, is that if the total bond outstanding is $11,143,000 as per the 2019 forecast, and I see that government is actually giving you $13,022,133 to finance debt, isn't that in essence more than what the bond amount is that is outstanding? So I'm trying to reconcile those two numbers now.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. As indicated, the portion for 2021 and the excess is what we're looking for project refund, which would be for portions of roads and infrastructure for any given project that we undertake. By that time, we will be in a very good position to actually request it as a refund.
Okay, so let me just understand then. So in essence, this 13 million plus isn't just for debt servicing, it's for other things.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct.
Okay, so the description there, again, is really what was misleading, because I'm looking at you getting $13 million to pay off 11.1 million, and I'm kind of, all right. No, it makes sense to me now, Mr. Chairman, so I'll leave for you guys to make the necessary corrections to these documents. And I just want to close by thanking the minister and the manager in terms of what it is they're doing, and including the board. I did have one more question. What is the financing term that you guys, what is the financing term typically that people get to repay these when they buy the houses from the National Housing Trust? What's the normal repayment period?
Mr. Chairman, through you, is the question in relation to what, our bond commitment or the homeowners?
No, sorry. I shifted gears, I apologize. This now goes into home ownership when people buy homes. Now, it is my understanding that they typically go through the banks to qualify. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct.
Okay, considering that we are looking at subsidizing the cost of some of these houses, because generally speaking, if we're trying to get a mortgage paid off within 20 to 30 years, it typically, which is a max that most banks are willing to go, would it be a situation then where if the bank is willing to go to 2030, would the National Housing Development Trust consider maybe doing a 10-year addendum, in other words now, to lengthen the period in terms of mortgages? I mean, I'm granted that most banks won't go for 40 years, but in a situation where once the bank is satisfied or their mortgage is paid off for 20, 30 years, a second charge be taken out that kicks in after year 25, 30 or whatever, payable to the National Housing Trust, because in essence, I mean, looking at the rough calculation, these are heavily subsidized, and as the population gets bigger, this subsidization is actually going to get bigger, recognizing the housing challenge. So it's a kind of a cute way to say we can get 40, 50-year mortgages in place, and in essence, sometimes it may require maybe 2 generations to pay for the houses, but we're trying to shift the burden away from the taxpayers. Is that something that you guys would consider looking at?
Are we trying to reduce the loan payment?
Mr. Chairman, that is one position that we've discussed with a few banks in itself because, like the member indicated, these houses are already highly subsidized. And as such, basically should give the position for even the homeowners or even the trust to actually negotiate and get in the round table discussion with the banks to basically put these individuals, not to set them up to fail, but also to basically with an agreed program or approach with their lending commitment to the individuals. I can't speak to it because the individuals are open to go to any private bank, but as such, I see it fit that if it is something that we can actually negotiate and arrange with these banks, why not?
I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do, the goal here is to find a monthly payment that they can afford. But the problem is those monthly payments won't basically allow for a home to be paid off in 20, 30 years. So the key then is to try to get to 40, 50. And you look at Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those things with those bond, where they actually work within the bond market, they are looking at 40, 50 type years. So it is from that standpoint, I think realistically. Now, I know in some banks where they'll basically give you mortgages up to 65, 70. So if you are a younger person, the ability to basically get a 40-year is even possible to some extent. But additionally, I know the minister spoke to me briefly once about even setting up a national housing trust where people can actually pay into monthly if they know eventually that, and that's something that they're looking at. Have you guys given a further thought to something like that?
Mr. Chairman, the trust was initially set up in and around that design. However, I don't want to necessarily say the failed exercise of basically having those housing inventory and people paying us back. That is why the board took the approach of going with the way of home ownership. Provide houses, and if you maintain these individuals under stock and arrangement is a long delayed and there's a stigma attached that once a house is in and around a government program, obviously government will subsidize any shortfalls. That is why the approach was taken by the board to continue with house sales that is dependent on both them qualifying under a program but also then qualifying on the mortgage arrangement with the respective banks. That program in itself of making people pay into it is something that can be considered, that eventually that once they prove themselves, of course the banks would also take them on as well because they will see that commitment. That's an approach that can actually be looked into as well. And just like any other programs, you pay into it before, and once you qualify, then you're obviously going in with already a down payment. Right now, what is working is individuals are utilizing their pensions in lieu of their deposits, and that is basically cushioning their risk. In this approach of what you're making reference to, it would work, but it would have to be an agreed and for how long we're going to basically hold them until when they graduate and have an equivalent built-up deposit in itself for them to be grandfathered into mortgage arrangements. The trust at this point in time is not necessarily going into the route of continual lease-to-own arrangements or long drawn-out programs, but it's more to the point that we want individuals to be able to afford these houses but also own them as quick as possible.
Thank you very much. Have you guys maybe considered the possibility of even doing a hybrid program through the Cayman Islands Development Bank? So you can have a program where you're even paying one bank $750 and you're paying the Cayman Islands Development Bank $100 a month or something over the next 25, 30 years. At least that way it will mitigate the subsidization, because ultimately what we want is to get more money back into the National Housing Trust to develop more homes as the population grows. So we need a model that is at least sustainable but also scalable.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a practical approach that can be taken. And the reason I'm saying that is the last set of houses, we've had a good amount of clients who basically got financing from CIDB who recently got approval. Now, to the point of basically having a hybrid program is something to be determined as well, and where we would have to get together with CIDB with their offering, along with basically, obviously it had to be more competitive than the banks, but it would also be mean on their qualifying criteria as well. And I think it can work. As of recent, we also have credit union that's just coming on board as well. Previously, it was all the mean commercial banks that were undertaking them, but with the credit union and CIDB, it could be something that could be worked.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to just close off by thanking again the Minister and the Manager. I give them credit in the fact that for what they've been doing for how long, we have resisted the urge to create kind of, I don't want to use the word like a ghetto type thing, but the reality of it is they have constructed homes where people basically kind of buy these homes with dignity and not feel as if though they're a burden on the state. And I think ultimately, as a people and society, that's actually very important. That while we are assisting people, they're not feeling as if though they are beggars or anything like that. So kudos to the board, the management, and the minister. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End, then I'm going to put the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear that their response to my colleague from Badintown West is that is something that can be looked into. Since 2002, I've been asking for that, some kind of second mortgage, but not only for those who qualify. I am talking about those who don't and at the lower bracket. So I've always said that, say if the payment on that house is $700 per month, there are many young single parents, and not only women, men too, who cannot qualify there, but they may be able to do $500 a month. The second mortgage should be in government. The lien of government should be for the $200. And at the time because we can expect that that's the less they will be making for the rest of their life. So at some stage they're going to increase their fortunes, and government holds that piece. We lost $12 million. It ain't gonna be that amount. And government holds that $200 amount, and when the time comes that that person lot increases in life, they can start paying on that $200. It may be when certainly if they move on and sell the house, then the equity is still in there. I disagree with you, Minister, on trying to find things for those above what we are currently providing. There are enough entrepreneurs, developers in this country who we should be encouraging to go to that other bracket. We need to concentrate on what we're doing and below it, just below it for qualifications. And certainly I don't want to hear that even if we go above what we are providing, it should not be a different build. It should be changing the criteria and increasing it with an understanding that we're going to go back down a little lower as well with a second loan, second mortgage on it that government holds in their possession to assist our people. That's where we're getting the problem. The people who are not qualifying now, you see many of them coming to apply, but they do not qualify because the repayment is too high. We need to find an ingenious way to deal with those, and I believe it is that government should hold that until their lot in life improves. And that's where we're going to get more Caymanians to own a little piece of this rock. Minister.
Mr. Chair, I tend to agree with the member, and I think one sector of we need to pay more attention also to that young person who is coming out of school, who doesn't have any kids or children, and just wants a one-bedroom, and they want their own piece of this estate also. So that when we talk about going lower, it doesn't necessarily mean for families who, not in the quality but criterias, and not necessarily apartments, but that's what a young person, a 21-year-old may want, or a teenager. That's all they may want, just an apartment complex, a one bedroom that they can call their own. So that's kind of like, but we're mulling it around.
All in favor of
Mr.
EI
Chair,
57?
Mr. Chairman? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did acknowledge you, member for Georgetown South. Then we're going to take the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Ramos. Can you say how many people are on the waiting list for the Georgetown homes?
Mr. Chair, through you, for Georgetown right now, in terms of applicants, individuals, right now it's 32 homes. The reason is we did a big clear up of all files in-house, and these are individuals that are waiting for any opportunity that once Georgetown gets started, that their application is fully completed. What we've seen historically through the trend is that once an announcement is made or commitment is made, that when we're building in one district, there's always an increased demand in itself or an application, because no one wants to submit an application in-house or submit it to us well knowing that no one knows or can give the commitment of when we're going to get started. So I can anticipate that once an announcement is given that we're going to Georgetown with a realistic timeline, this 32 is going to increase to over 100 or 200.
Thank you. Through the chairman. Can you say how long they have been on that waiting list?
Mr. Chair, through you, I would say that they have been there approximately over a year, specifically when we had the work started for the district of East End and Bordentown. So they've been there since then, and most of these individuals, they basically went to the approach of saying wherever is available, we're just going to take it. And that's why they're included their interest, that in the event that if we're not getting to Georgetown at some point in time, if there is a house available in West Bay or Bordentown or East End, they would like to be considered.
Thank you. How do you prioritize people that qualify in terms of if it's families with children, seniors? Can you explain how those are prioritized in terms of qualifying for a home?
Mr. Chair, through you, we tend to undertake the needs assessment, and it does have a weighted average or point basis in terms of young professionals, families with kids, single families, and we try to basically maintain a good balance of those. We prioritize more so of an individual that has 1 to 2 to 3 kids, because we understand that they will have that commitment or that help with basically their housing need. As opposed to an individual as a young professional, we do not negate them the opportunity, but we also tend to prioritize for individuals, say for example a single mother with 2 or 3 kids. They will have a higher need in comparison to a family of 2, because that's 2 income versus 1 income. And sometimes it's really hard to make a call, but as such, we basically try to put a family that's going to need it most and for which would give them that disposable income with their commitment. With a young professional, you'd appreciate that they have further time to develop themselves, but also opportunities to basically change but don't have that commitment of personal expenses. So it's basically a weighting on a needs assessment basis.
Thank you. The Minister of Education referred to insurance and how these homes were insured. Now, I know the affordable homes down in July Street, some of them, the individuals are still making mortgage payments directly to the NHDT. Are those homes still insured by the trust, or how are they protected?
Mr. Chair, through you, that is correct. Those individuals that still have tenancy arrangement under way of lease to own that were grandfathered from the program, they do pay an interest portion of their mortgage arrangement of what they had with the trust, but also a portion of insurance as well. How their insurance comes about, say for example, a 2-bedroom, they're paying an equivalent of $62 to $64 a month, and a 3-bedroom on insurance, and a 3-bedroom they're paying an approximate of $80. What we've done over the past is that whenever we negotiate insurance for these batch of houses, we negotiate that the premium comes down and any savings in itself is passed on to the homeowners.
Okay, one last question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Ramos. Can you explain the GG-HAM program, how that actually works?
The GG-HAM program, the Government Guaranteed Home Assistance Mortgage Program, came into life in 2007. It came as a spin-off from GGHMS, which was the equivalent that was managed by CIDB. Housing was tasked with actually administering this program, and it aims for basically providing mortgage assistance by way of in lieu of their deposits for individuals, but a higher income bracket of individuals that reach up to $6,250 per month. These are basically higher income earners than AHI, and this allows individuals to purchase property with a government guarantee of up to 35% in lieu of basically in their deposits at any of the 6 participating banks. The program in itself came into line in 2007 and with a 5-year that expired in 2012, of which that program, 65 million facility was arranged and approved, and of that, 52 to 54 million was drawn from these 5 participating banks before the program expired in 2012, of which 325 families had the benefit of getting GG-HAM. To date, we maintain and we administer and manage that program, and we do that by way of what we call a service. So you would appreciate that we're under the outputs, we're output 5, and we continue to monitor, bring down the delinquency along with the banks. And so far, I can give you some statistics if you would like. I hope I'm not giving you so much, but 325 and we've had a default of not even 1 to 2% overall. If anything we can brag about is that, and keeping it down and not having to make government pay so much of a 20 million overall in terms of liability. And 1 minute, where is it? So to date, we currently from 325, we have 132 that remain active. Obviously, it's gone down because individuals have paid down on the 35% commitment and no longer need that commitment. And in that sense, if the program was still active and continued, we can continue to service and give mortgage for other individuals under that program.
So the idea now is to restart the GG-HAM program.
That is correct. The plan is basically for us to go back to the banks and reinvigorating or reinitiating the program, but also agreeing on the points of where we had the differences in the agreements and negotiating to further extend. If we were to do that, we would have an approximately close to 200 individuals that we can assist with that program.
Mr. Chairman, just
I had a member from Georgetown Central reluctantly going to allow one more question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll concede to Leader of Opposition.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the member. One of the proposals that I did was to use a different method, not building method, but a different method of getting material. And it was for us to, and this is it with regards, I think it was him or my colleague, one of my colleagues talking about reducing the cost of building. Getting the suppliers here to order material in bulk. We develop a compound where we hire a few carpenters to build door frames, build window frames, whatnot. All that material is there once you have done your proper takeoff. And government wouldn't pay duties, they wouldn't pay all the fees for that material. At the time when I calculated that, I estimated it would reduce the cost. So we would only pay the contractors a cost to build, not for them to go buy material with duties thereon. I estimated that would bring down the cost of our affordable homes by some 30% at the time. It's probably more now. This is way back, over 10 years ago. Has any I know I've talked to the chairman at length about these things, but and he is very keen on looking at something like that. Do you know when he's going to try and do something like that?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we've had the discussion, especially even with the Go Green and the higher energy efficiency, of approaches that can be taken. The Housing Development Trust has had its history of maintaining costs, and that's the fact that we drill down on the bill of quantities and we draft up contracts in relation to how we're going to build these homes and what's the cost. Obviously, the trust, as well as government, does not need to profit off of these, but the approach of having to order these things at bulk is something that we're already considering. A good example is that of the cabinets. You would have heard mentioned that right now we're maintaining costs of our trend of maintaining costs from 2010 straight to 2019. And that's because we found ways and means of either taking some of this cost on our own to negotiate it and not let the contractors negotiate it. Hence the point of having these houses equipped with granite countertop, wooden, and we've learned over the years of the trends of where we can learn. So the approach of ordering this material at bulk and negotiating with the main vendors is something that we're looking at as well.
And Mr. Chairman, I understand that people are going to, I can see the headline now, social building of homes. Yes, so what? They can call me a socialist, but I believe that there are people in this country who needs an uplift. And I believe government has a responsibility, this legislature has a responsibility to do that. And then when we reduce that as much as possible, more people will qualify. And one other colleague said to me recently, not on this side, but one other colleague said to me that about giving one contractor more homes so that his profits can be realized within that bulk, as opposed to one or two homes. And I support that colleague's view, but our most important thing is reducing the cost of building in this country. And we can. I am convinced we can reduce the cost of these homes, and that's without having any inferior material. We can, and I would like to see that. I really would like to see that, in order that those same people I'm talking about, the single parents in particular, man and woman, and I recently assisted one in East End, Mr. Chairman, with getting his, and that was one of the happiest days of my career in politics. He had 2 children, and he's getting a little 3-bedroom house, and he works for one of the government departments down at the lower rung. And when I assisted him with getting over to a different institution and whatnot, and they approved that I did something. In my 19 years, if that's the only one I did, then I'm satisfied. And that's what this is all about. If each of us, 19 members, get one, that's 19 homes. And I believe we can do it by reducing the cost.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank the member for those comments, and hence the reason why one of the first tangible projects the government achieved this term is through the Housing Development Trust. We recognize that this is very important. Our Caymanians, or each Caymanian, or anyone who wants to to own a piece of this real estate. We need to encourage as many as possible and to continue coming up with new programs and trying to find more affordable ways for the citizens of this country, Caymanians, to realize their dreams. I too have helped some of those persons, just like the member from the opposition leader, and it is a joy that you can't explain when you see them so happy for their families. So we have to continue this, whether it's this government or the next, in building homes, Mr. Chair, for affordable homes for Caymanians. We do need to appreciate that we have persons on the low end of the scale who this will help. And as I say to them all the time, don't feel embarrassed, don't feel ashamed. The way that we're building these communities now is no less than any other. You see, we're putting granite and everything in it now. And this doesn't have to be the end. This can be a stepping board. If they find themselves realizing a new position after taking additional education studies or otherwise, then they can move on to something else and graduate at their choice. But at least a roof over their head.
All in favor of EI 57, National Housing Development Trust, $8,022,133 in 2020 and $5 million in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. We now turn back to EI 53, Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing, $33,768,867 in 2020 and $8,261,993 in 2021. I need to take a quick break here. Just give me a chance to confer with the financial secretary. So 5 minutes and we'll be right back.